15 years, a number that governed equipment life across oceans. Now it's gone. The new guide abandons fixed expiration dates for condition-based assessment. But without this universal benchmark, who decides when equipment becomes dangerous? We uncover the surprising history behind the 15-year rule and explore whether market competition or safety science will shape equipment standards in this new era. So my question for you, Ruth, is given the lack of historical industry standard beyond the previous 15-year limit, what specific documented technical evidence must an operator demand from a service provider to demonstrate due diligence that a fender operating at, say, 16 years is still safe and reliable?
Yeah, I mean, I think, firstly, I think that the improvements in the new guidance is it's great to see, as we've discussed, some of the issues, some of the areas around human factors, for example, Stop Work Authority, really positive. I do think this is one area where I'm not so fully on board, and I think pneumatic fenders, as we know, can last for a very long time, and especially if you're selecting a high quality brand. However, a lot rests on what it's been used for, where it's been stored. You can see maintenance records. You can see when a valve's been replaced, for example. You can provide that documentation. But I'm slightly confused by the removal of the 15-year mark, because there's, especially as we move now into more ammonia transfers, for example, much more reactive substances, to have an issue with a fender that hasn't been properly maintained or just fails, for example, it's concerning.
Mark?
Yeah, so I was kind of curious, the 15 years in the previous guide, how was that figure decided upon? Because as far as I can see, having an age prescription to a piece of equipment that may be used, anything from 10 times to 3,000 times in 15 years doesn't make much sense. So I appreciate the move away from the timeline. I think that's the wrong direction to be in. But I just wonder where that came from in the first place, and now how will we attain the relevant data to be able to decide, realistically how long to keep a fender in use, whether it will go by the number of operations, the type of operations, the geographic location. There are so many variables.
Yeah, well, first off, I need to put my hand up because I am remiss by not thanking our co-authors. I need to recognize this was not an OCHIMF document. OCHIMF led the work of many co-authors, CDI, ICS, and SIGTO, in addition to OCHIMF. Beyond the co-authors, there were a number of contributors that provided content to the working group. There was a solicitation for input from the industry that the working group sent out. We received over 900 responses back from industry. All of those responses were reviewed. I can't say that all 900 of those suggestions made their way into the document, but I can say that all of those responses and feedback that the working group received were reviewed and consideration given to. So first off, I just want to thank everyone who did contribute to that document. With regard to the 15-year prior guidance, I don't know. I don't know what the basis for that was previously. To your point, an arbitrary number, whether it be 15 years, 5 years, 10 years, it feels arbitrary. And that would be the reason to go to a condition-based assessment program, and working with the equipment manufacturers, taking their guidance on board in terms of the construction. High quality equipment makers would be able to provide guidance to their customers on the expected lifespan of the equipment, the expected maintenance and inspection intervals, and the type of maintenance inspection programs that they should be following to ensure maximum lifespan of the equipment. And as you said, it depends on the use of the equipment, the care of the equipment, the storage. Is it stored outside in bright sun, or is it always under tarpaulins and inspected on a regular basis? Is it well maintained? Is it inspected at prescribed intervals? All of those things would go into the lifespan of the equipment, and that would need to be determined jointly by the users of the equipment and the equipment makers based on their experience.
In 1996, there was a study by the Congress in the US about the effectiveness of STS operations at the Gulf of Mexico, and there was a big discussion about the effectiveness of fenders. Keep this in account. In 2002, in 2003, we had the introduction and the first discussions at the IMO for the new MARPOL Chapter 8. And for this reason, because Spain and Denmark wanted to apply very heavy control over the STS operations, on 2005, that edition, which is the fourth renewal of the STS guide ever since 1975, they were introduced the 15-year threshold on the fenders, plus a threshold of 4 years to the cargo hoses. So these thresholds were introduced on the fourth edition on 2005. That was reconsidered on 2013, and 2013 they removed the lifespan for cargo hoses, and now we see cargo hoses being challenged in 10 years in the market, 8 years, 10 years, and now we removed the 15 years. So it was first into the guide as a defense of OCMF against what was coming to the IMO. So they went very strongly, OCMF went very strongly to the IMO on 2005 and said, guide, we have a control over safety. And it's inside our new guide in order to make sure that the new resolution of the IMO would end up with minor consequences to the industry. Okay, that's why we had the 15 years in that edition of the OCMF STS guide. From history.
Yeah, I think one of the things we've got to look at now is having, say, for example, we have a MEC 4, we have a mooring plan, but we now need to have a fender plan and to introduce some sort of fender management process. And the reason why I say that, because the fender behaviour is completely different when we're in open water offshore compared to what we are in a port, because it's a completely different dynamic. So what we see now is when we look at offshore, we have, prior to the LNG carrier arriving, we have a fender inspection. What that inspection consists of is the tugmaster sailing alongside, looking at the fenders, make sure it's not split, it's not leaking, it's actually functional, but it's a visual inspection. Sometimes they'll prod it and make sure it's connected. But there's no sort of step procedure. It's still there. But I think the time has come now that we have to have some sort of fender management plan for the offshore environment, because it's completely different, and they see a lot more stress due to the environmental condition. So what that fender management plan is, I have no idea. It's something we probably have to discuss in the industry and agree. But I think we're at that point now because we're seeing more and more of these offshore transfers.
So do you agree with the fact that OCMF removed the 50 years?
No, but I just think, I mean, there's already procedures in place now. It's just, the fact is that those procedures may be quite old and they may have been governed around what we were doing in the past, say 15 years ago, when we're in benign conditions in a sheltered water port. Now when I'm in open water and I'm seeing wave variations, current variations, wind variations, which has an impact on the compression of the fender between the two vessels. Now, I don't know what the plan is at the moment. I have no idea what it is, but I think we're at that point now where we have to determine what is the lifespan of the fender. When do we change them out?
So what you're asking...
How do we manage that? How do we record the data that's, do we have for example, like we have now with mooring lines, do we have a clever fender process, which actually records how much pressure is being put onto it? Is that feasible with the technology we have today?
It is. Somebody has done it already.
Exactly. Well, I brought the point up, people have already done that. So I think, but again, someone in the industry got it. Is this an OCMF requirement? Is it ISGOT or is it SIG2? But I think we're at that point now where someone has to take the lead. Maybe the fender manufacturers and providers take the lead.
Andrew made a very good point, because actually what you mean is that we need new ISO guidelines on fenders.
I would agree with that.
Exactly.
Agree with that.
I'm in favor that OCMF remove the 15 years, because OCMF is not there to set thresholds. It's for the equipment and for the industry to align. So I'm totally in favor. but it happened arbitrary. So now the industry will have to react. At least we should call for an ISO first and ask for the manufacturers to come alongside, because now we're going to see, apologies, fenders 30 years old. I have seen many fenders. In the US, you have a firm that has many of such fenders.
Not ours.
Not yours.
We have very strict
Yeah.
guidelines on ours. No, and that was what I was going to say.
But you see, competition now will drive the industry in the wrong direction.
And going back to what you were talking about earlier, Andy, in terms of the debrief, though, that's part of that debrief, though, too, in terms of, I don't think the only question should be asked what went wrong and what went right, but also what barriers are there now to us moving forward. What are the obstacles in our way? And that's one of the things we put. But that's all part of earlier in the opening remarks in the main conference. They talked about agile and being agile and flexible. And agile methodologies actually dictate that you're going to ask those 3 questions when you do a debrief: is what happened right, what went wrong, and what are your barriers to moving forward. But in terms of ours, I mean, I don't see us changing that, but I agree. One of the things that we've done too as well in terms of the basket now is worked with Billy Pugh and the manufacturers and ABS to develop the ISO guidelines for how baskets are to be developed and put those standards into place. And I think that that's what needs to happen now in terms of the fenders and the hoses as well, and put actual ISO standards in place to sit there and say that this is the time frame for those things.